Welcome learners. I'll welcome you to the session Global Sourcing. Global sourcing is a practice of sourcing from the global market for goods and services across geopolitical boundaries. Global sourcing often aims to exploit global efficiencies in the delivery of a product or a service. The stages in a global sourcing strategy. Global product sourcing refers to a procurement strategy through which an enterprise works to identify the most cost-effective location for product manufacturing, even if that location may be in a foreign country. For instance, a cement manufacturing company may find that the costs of raw materials and manufacturing are lower in some foreign country because manpower is cheaper there. The company would therefore opt to shut down its domestic operations and set up a plant in that foreign country. The general sourcing process can be divided into 5 stages. Now we shall see each and every stage. The first stage, preliminary research. This consists of the investigation and tendering. At this stage, the enterprise identifies the core and non-core operational activities, analyzes the customer and market requirements, and identifies the competitors. The idea is to develop the firm's business objectives, prospective markets, and brand positioning. The strategic sourcing scope is also outlined through a business plan developed by the executive and the sourcing specialist, and the preliminary work strategy and the baseline for measuring the performance is established and documented as a procurement process plan. The second stage is the market and supplier evaluation. At this stage, the enterprise develops a detailed list of supplier selection benchmarks, which is used to select the most appropriate suppliers that fit the requirements. Based on the findings of the process, the sourcing strategy may be taken as further and a final costing model is released. The operational and economic benefits of the project will then be estimated. Then the suppliers will get shortlisted. Selection of the supplier. Selection of the supplier is the third stage, wherein the event will be sourced. After the supplier and the market has been evaluated, a final list of suppliers is selected and negotiation for the products is carried out, and the supply agreement will be culminated. Technical assessment of final supply candidates is conducted to come up with the savings estimates for each. Finally, an implementation schedule outlining the timelines for various suppliers is developed. The fourth stage is the implementation stage. A performance analysis schedule should be developed, outlining all the activities in the implementation process. The implementation team should be constituted by the procurement agent, and the schedule and the strategy should be published. Agreements related to the shared supply resources and logistical arrangements are developed. At this stage, the expected internal and external results from the suppliers should be documented. Periodic measurement and reporting of actual measurement should also be carried out. The fifth stage is the performance monitoring stage. The performance of the suppliers is measured both independently and also in relation to the resources and processes applied by the supply partners. This should be carried out routinely and reported accordingly. In-depth evaluation of the efficacy of the collaborative efforts with each supplier is obtained, and the partners involved continuously isolate the problems and find out the ways that can be solved for improving the performance. So this global sourcing strategy involves 5 stages, namely investigating and tendering the global suppliers. That will be the preliminary research. Second one is evaluating the markets and evaluating the suppliers. Third one is selecting the suppliers, then implementing the schedule, and the last one is monitoring the performance. The monitoring of performance will be the last stage, and the main advantage of monitoring is to have an efficient procurement process and that should be a flexible one and also a dynamic one, and it should also be easily adaptable to the changing market environment. So thus, the global sourcing strategy is said to be a most important cost-effective strategy that should be framed by an organization. Next is the factors or the areas in which the global sourcing strategy has to concentrate or it has to address the problems. First area is the cost area. The main purpose of product sourcing strategy is to take the advantage of a lower labor cost in the foreign countries. However, the procuring organization will face additional costs that do not factor into the domestic transactional cost. These includes the broker fees, freight charges, and the taxes, insurance, bank fees, etc. The law, the legal restrictions. The sourcing specialist together with the supplier should consider what body of law should be applied to their contractual agreement. That is, what is the law of the nation, what is the law of the buyer's country and the supplier's country, and what is the law applicable to the signed treaty between these two countries. Then the next area to be concentrated is the currency. Some buyers may insist on the transactions in their own currency for the sake of simplicity. However, a prudent buyer will consider the possibility of using the supplier's currency where the buying country's currency may become stronger in a period between the agreement and the supply, and also to have an eventual payment. Next is the lead time. Global purchases have a significantly longer lead time than the domestic sources. The reason is that overseas travel is slower unless air travel is used. In addition, there is time taken in the custom clearance process which does not apply for the domestic sources. Next area is the culture and the language. Where the procurement agent is unfamiliar with the culture and the language of the supplier, the risk of misunderstanding, miscommunication and the offensive encounters will significantly increase. Transportation. It is again another area to be addressed. Whereas the domestic sourcing necessitates the use of a single mode of transportation, global sourcing frequently includes multiple modes of transport, that is combining air or water transportation with the road transport to bring the goods from the supplier to the supplier's port and to the port of the buyer and finally the place of the buyer. So the domestic sourcing necessitates only a single mode, but the global sourcing will have a multiple modes of transport. Next is the method of payment. In case of global sourcing, a letter of credit is used for the payment, which necessitates the cooperation of the banks of the both supplier and also the buyer. So the global sourcing has to take into consideration the cost, the legal restrictions or the legal regulations, the currency to be calculated, then the exchange rates, the lead time, the culture and the language of the both the countries, transportation, what is the mode of transportation and the method of payment. Now, this purchasing manager has to take into consideration certain points while sourcing the international sourcing international managers who are responsible for sourcing. First one is, the manager should familiarize himself with the local social business cultures. So he must have the familiarity with the social culture and the business culture of that country. Lack of familiarity with the foreign social and business cultures and the communications may result in many differences, and this will be the major cause of the international sourcing activities to become a failure one. Then the sourcing manager has to establish a clear communication channels with the functional departments and management levels at the company level. The manager must be in a position to able to address and deal with the issues within the company, that is at the corporate level, while developing a cooperative team to address an offshore or an outsourcing problems. And if the management is not behind the sourcing manager, the job becomes more difficult. So the management should support the sourcing managers to address the issues at the corporate level itself. Then the manager should have the information regarding the own geographic region, and if any internal prototype or a pilot production capabilities are possible, then he has to portray it. Many companies may find themselves in a very deep hole after sending the teams of engineers or quality assurance personnel and other staff members on extended trips to low-cost regions after a design or a product quality issue surfaces during production. This type of reactive activity can send a total cost of ownership through the roof. Then the sourcing manager should also understand the basic technical aspects of the different items of the product to be sourced. This does not require a manager to become a design engineer or a software engineer, but he must have a basic knowledge regarding the design and the software of a particular component or a sub-assemblies or any finished products that they are sourcing it. Then the source managers should also identify the suppliers in the low-cost regions very carefully, and this should be followed with a very rigid procedures involving the supplier's qualification. The qualification being the design, the quality, the production, and the financial capabilities of the potential suppliers at their own factory sites, and the factory sites will not be the supplier's place. And this also involves the verification of relative ISO certifications and other international standard certifications. This process should also include potential supplier qualification for the subcontractors also, if their product is to be given on a contract. Then the source manager should develop a working knowledge of all the contracts. So the source managers should be able to negotiate the terms of the contract apart from the price. Say for example, the payment terms, the repair and the compensation terms, the safety terms, the consignment buffers, buffer stock in the consignments, and then to include certain items in a contract. Say for example, the various other terms of the contract regarding the transportation, the price, the insurance, the taxes, etc. So he must know the very basic knowledge regarding the contract to be entered. So the source manager should have common knowledge, and he must have a full contact with the suppliers. Only then he can understand the various terms of the contracts and he can go for the negotiations. So simply stated, negotiations cannot be made only for the price but also for the other terms of the contract. Then the source manager should have a visit in the supplier's place. So he has to make a trip to the foreign countries, that is the international sourcing places. So in those places he must go and visit, and he has to see to it whether the suppliers are being made it in a correct manner or as per the specifications mentioned. That source managers should have the visit in their own factory areas, though the cost is going to be incremental in nature. Because as we say, the cost will go, that is, the cost will increase. But the valuable time of the sourcing managers must be spent on those areas to find out whether the contract is carried on in a correct direction. Then the source manager should also have a knowledge over the sales tools, factory sales tools. Many suppliers will be predetermined one, and they will be well tuned with the customer's tools, and they will have a common prototype model to have a supply of goods and services. But these source managers must have a complete knowledge of the sales tools of these factories. If the suppliers try to present only the high latest technical part of their own factories, then the managers have nothing to do with the manufacturing processes required by them. And again, the source managers have to work closely with the suppliers from prototype and a new product introduction, and through their own first article and first article unit inspection, and the product volume should also increase. That is, the source managers should develop a working knowledge of all the product field, the product test fields, and they must know about the reasonable rates for that product fields returns. And returns here, I mean the profit on those own products. And the product export documentation requirements, freight consolidation, and other aspects of the supply chain management, and the throughout the end of the life of the product, we call it as EOL, end of life of the product, should be taken care of by the sourcing managers. And again, the good suppliers normally anticipate the problems. From a general experience, all the anticipated problems must be typically handled by the sourcing managers, and they must have the capacity of solving all those problems in an international level. Then we have the electronics manufacturing services kidnapping. Say for example, this electronics manufacturing service providers will have their own facilities at the global level. This large outsource providers can also take the component's design and prototype to the other country wherein you are not permitting it. So this kidnapping of all those manufacturing services is also possible. So international sourcing manager must have a complete knowledge over this EMS, that is electronic manufacturing services, and he has to be very cautious enough whether his product or his technology is taken to the another country without any information or the intimation. So depending upon the business relationships with the suppliers and the contracts between them, these outsourcing managers must have a complete knowledge of all the equipments and the materials that they are going to purchase, and they must have a complete control over the use of those products and services without any kidnapping it. The source manager should also be aware of the local sourcing agents. So we have to be very cautious regarding the local sourcing agents also, because the companies paying the best commissions may get the best service from the single source agents. But the companies will rarely work with one client. But the quality can sometimes be an issue, because the documented procedures can be forgotten in order to get a shipment. The shipping is by sea. The company could find itself in a situation within 1 or 2 months worth of marginal product already on the high seas, and that is high seas for the routing of all those products. Next is setting up a sourcing office offshore. There may be a point or a time when it becomes a sense to significantly reduce the traveling back and forth to the low-cost countries. An offshore sourcing office should be staffed with the trained managers and staff for purchasing, quality control, production control, product engineering, export documentation, and other functional areas. This location may also provide capable product design activity. After all, there should be a practical limit as to what can be managed effectively and efficiently from halfway around the world. While offshoring sources offices could appear to help reduce total cost of ownership, they can also create many problems. Just as sourcing managers must understand the social and the business cultural differences in the low-cost countries, the sourcing office general manager on the ground in the LCC, that is the low-cost countries, must understand the Western culture and the business practices, especially those specific to his own country. The need for this type of understanding becomes readily apparent when companies try to root cause the supply chain or product issues while driving issues to the resolution with a true sense of this urgency. International sourcing is not a purchasing. Global sourcing managers must have a broad background across several functional disciplines, and they must have an access to the corporate resources and employ a great deal of common sense. It is not wise to proceed with any international sourcing activity or outsourcing program thinking, an out-of-box solution can be applied in an organized and a thoughtful manner. And the international sourcing managers must have it in their mind that China is not only the low-cost solution. Nowadays, China has become a buzzword for many companies, but the sourcing managers must be prepared to objectively inform the company management whenever it is determined that the company should not go into the China products on a particular area or a particular component or a sub-assembly or a program. This global trade, otherwise called as an international trade, is simply an import and export of goods and services across the international boundaries. Goods and services that enter into the country for sale are called as imports. Goods and services that leave the country for sale in another country are called as exports. A country may import wheat, but it does not have much of any arable land, but export oil because it has an oil in abundance. So whatever product that is in abundance, it can be exported, and whatever that are scarce, you can go in for the importing of the goods. Global trade can also create economic wealth on a global scale as each country maximizes its revenue and growth by focusing on what it does best and saving money on imports that would be more costly for it to produce domestically. A country generates revenue from exporting the excess goods and services that its domestic market does not need to the other countries that have a different comparative advantage. The money it receives from the exports can then be used to import the goods and services it does not produce from those countries that have a comparative advantage in the production of goods and services. Global trade can also reduce the international conflicts and also the war. It may not make intuitive sense at its first glance, but we have to think for a moment. Global trade creates a long-term mutually beneficial relationships. Global trade cultivates cooperation rather than a conflict. Now we shall see what are the advantages of the global trade or the international trade. The first main advantage is the optimum use of natural resources. International trade helps each country to make optimum use of its natural resources. Each country can concentrate on production of those goods for which its resources are best suited. The wastage of resources is much avoided. The next main advantage is the availability of all the types of goods and services. It enables a particular country to obtain the goods which it cannot produce or which it is not producing due to higher cost by importing from the other countries at a lower cost. So the availability of all types of goods and services is made. Specialization. Foreign trade leads to specialization and encourages production of different goods in different countries. Goods can be produced at a comparatively low cost due to the advantages of division of labor. Then advantages of large scale production. Due to international trade, goods are produced not only for home consumption but also for export to the other countries. Nations of the world can dispose of goods which they have in surplus in their international markets. This leads to the production at a large scale, and the advantages of large scale production can be obtained by all the countries of the world. So when we have more of production, we can have the lower cost of production. Stability in prices. International trade irons out the various fluctuations or the many high fluctuations in prices. It equalizes the prices of goods and services throughout the world. Then exchange of the technical know-how and establishment of new industries. Underdeveloped countries can also establish and develop new industries with the machineries, equipment and technical know-how that is imported from the developed countries. This helps in the development of these countries and also the economy at the global level. Increase in efficiency. Due to international competition, the producers in the country attempt to produce better quality goods and at the minimum possible cost. This will increase the efficiency and benefits to the consumers all over the world. Development of means of transport and communication. International trade acquires the best means of transport and communication. For the advantages of this global trade, development in the means of transport and communication is also made possible. International cooperation and understanding. The people of different countries come in contact with each other. Commercial intercourse amongst the nations of the world encourages exchange of ideas and culture. It creates cooperation, understanding, cordial relations among various countries. Ability to face the natural calamities. Natural calamities such as famine, flood, earthquakes, drought will affect the production of a particular country in a very great extent. Deficiency in the supply of goods at the time of such natural calamities can be met by the imports from the other countries. The international trade also helps in many ways as benefits to the customers to have an international peace and have a better standard of living. So put it in a nutshell, the advantages of the international trade will be the optimum use of natural resources, availability of all types of goods in all countries, specialization, advantages of large scale production, price stability, exchange of the technical know-how and establishing the new industries, increases the efficiency, developing the transport and communication, international cooperation, then ability to face the natural calamities. At last, it increases the international, results in an international peace and a better standard of living. Though we have many advantages of this global trade, we do have the certain demerits. The first one is it is an impediment in the development of home industries. International trade or a global trade may have an adverse effect on the development of home industries. It poses a threat to the survival of the infant industries in the home country. Due to foreign competition and unrestricted imports, the upcoming industries in the home country may collapse. Economical dependence. The underdeveloped countries have to depend on the developed ones for their economic development. Such reliance may often lead to the economic exploitation. Political dependence. International trade often encourages the slavery. It impairs economic independence, which endangers the political dependence also. Misutilization of natural resources. Excessive exports may exhaust the natural resources of a country in a very short span of time it would have been otherwise. This will cause economic downfall in the country in the long time. Import of the harmful goods. Import of the harmful goods like drugs, luxury articles may adversely affect the economy and well-being of the people. Shortage of the goods. Some essential commodities required in the country may be in short supply because it was exported to the foreign countries to earn a foreign exchange. This results in the shortage of the goods at the home country and it may cause the inflation. Then danger to the international peace. International trade gives an opportunity to the foreign agents to settle down in the country in which it will ultimately endanger its internal peace. World wars. International trade breeds the rivalries among the nations due to competition in the foreign markets. This may result in the wars and it may disturb the world peace. Hardships in the times of war. This international trade promotes lopsided development of a country as only those goods which have comparatively cost advantage are produced in the country. During the wars or when good relations do not prevail between the countries, this may form very high problems among the countries. So we have the disadvantages or the demerits as impediment in the development of the home industries, economic dependence, political dependence, exhaustive use of your natural resources, import of the harmful goods. They may result in a shortage of goods. This may endanger the international peace. It may result in the world war and it may also result in the hardships during the war. We shall see about the EXIM policy or foreign trade policy of our country. EXIM policy, that is the export-import policy or a foreign trade policy, is a set of guidelines and instructions established by the DGFT in the matters related to the import and export goods in India. That is the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, DGFT. The foreign trade policy of India is guided by the export-import in known as short as EXIM policy of Indian government and is regulated by the Foreign Trade Development Regulation Act 1992. The Director General of Foreign Trade, DGFT, is the main governing body in matters related to the EXIM policy. The main objective of Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act is to provide the development and regulation of foreign trade by facilitating the imports into and augmenting the exports from India. Foreign Trade Act has replaced the earlier law known as Import and Export Control Act 1947. Indian EXIM policy contains various related decisions taken by the government in the sphere of foreign trade, that is with respect to the import and export from the country, and more especially export promotion measures, policies and procedures related to those export promotions. Trade policy is prepared and announced by the central government, that is the Ministry of Commerce. India's export and import policy, also known as foreign trade policy in general, aims at developing export potential, improving the export performance, encouraging the foreign trade, and creating favorable balance of payments position. In the year 1962, the Government of India appointed a special EXIM policy committee to review the government's previous export-import policies. The committee was later on approved by the Government of India. Sri V.P. Singh, the then Commerce Minister, announced the EXIM policy on the 12th of April 1985. Initially, EXIM policy was introduced for a period of 3 years with the main objective to boost the export business in India. Government control import of non-essential items through the EXIM policy. At the same time, all-out efforts are made to promote the exports. Thus, there are two aspects of EXIM policy. The import policy, which is concerned with the regulation and management of imports, and export policy, which is concerned with the exports, not only promotion but also regulation. The main objective of the government's EXIM policy is to promote exports to the maximum extent. Exports should be promoted in such a manner that the economy of the country is not affected by the unregulated exportable items, especially needed within the country. Export control is therefore exercised in respect of limited number of items whose supply position demands that their export should be regulated in the large interest of the country. In other words, the main objective of EXIM policy is as follows: to accelerate the economy from the low level of economic activities to a high level of economic activities by making it a globally oriented, vibrant economy, and to derive maximum benefits from expanding global market opportunities. To stimulate sustained economic growth by providing access to the essential raw materials, intermediate parts, components, consumables, and capital goods required for augmenting the production. To enhance the techno-local strength and efficiency of Indian agriculture, industry and services, thereby improving their own competitiveness. To generate the new employment opportunities and encourage the attainment of internationally accepted standards of quality. To provide quality consumer products at the reasonable prices. The EXIM policy is updated every year on 31st March, and modifications, improvements and new schemes have an effective from 1st April of every year. All types of changes or modifications related to the EXIM policy is normally announced by the Union Minister of Commerce and Industry, who coordinates with the Ministry of Finance the Directorate General of Foreign Trade and Network of DGFT regional offices. The Foreign Trade Policy (FTP) to 2015 to 20 was unveiled by Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, Minister of State for Commerce and Industry, is said to be the independent charge Government of India on 1st April 2015. We shall see the highlights of the FTP, Foreign Trade Policy. FTP 2015-20 provides a framework for increasing exports of goods and services as well as generation of employment and increasing value addition in the country, in line with the Make in India program. The policy aims to enable India to respond to the challenges of external environment, keeping in step with a rapidly evolving international trading architecture and make trade a major contributor to the economic growth of the country and also its development. FTP 2015-20 introduces two main schemes, namely Mercantile Exports from India Scheme (MEIS), Mercantile Exports from India Scheme (MEIS) for export of specified goods to specified markets, and Services Exports from India Scheme (SEIS), Services Exports from India Scheme (SEIS), for increasing exports of notified services. We have two different services, scheme. One is for mercantile exports, another one is for the service exports. Duty credit scrips issued under MEIS and SEIS, and the goods imported against these scrips are said to be freely transferable, and it is also fully transferable. For grant of rewards under MEIS, the countries are being categorized into three groups, whereas the rates of rewards under MEIS range from 2% to 5%. Under SEIS, the selected services would be rewarded at the rate of 3% and 5%. Measures have been adopted to nudge the procurement of capital goods from the indigenous manufacturers under the EPCG scheme by reducing a specific export obligation to 75% of the normal export obligation. Measures have been taken to give a boost to exports of defense and high-tech items. E-commerce exports of handloom products, books, periodicals, leather, footwear. Then we have the toys, customized fashion garments through their courier or foreign post office would also be able to get benefit of MEIS for values up to the 25,000 rupees. Manufacturers who are also the status holders will now be able to self-certify their own manufactured products in phases as originating from India with a view to qualifying for the preferential treatment under various forms of bilateral and regional trade agreements. The approved exporter system will help the manufacturer exporters considerably in getting fast access to the international markets. A number of steps have been taken for encouraging the manufacturing and exports under 100% EOU, EHTP, STPI, BTP schemes. The steps include a fast-track clearance facility for these units, permitting them to share infrastructure facilities, permitting inter-unit transfer facilities, then to have warehouses near the port of the export, and to have the duty-free equipment for training purposes. 108 MSME clusters have been identified for focused interventions to boost the exports. Accordingly, the scheme was repositioned to achieve the objectives of Skill India. Trade facilitation and enhancing the ease of doing business are the major focus areas in the new FTP. One of the major objectives is to move forwards towards the paperless working in 24/7 environment. So this happens to be the major objectives of the FTP, which was announced in 2015. Now the EXIM policy has been replaced by the Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20. Now this has been updated by the Ministry of Finance regularly. So in this session, we saw about the global sourcing, what are all the advantages of international trade, disadvantages of international trade and what does this EXIM policy says. Thank you.